Welcome, dear listeners. Welcome to the last chapter of the tale of Minotaur and the Labyrinth. Crafting stories like this takes considerable time and effort. If you enjoy this narrative and like to support the creation, please consider subscribing to Twilight Moonlit channel. This is a longer story, so feel free to save and return later if you're unable to finish it in at once. The vision had struck Theron with the force of a thunderclap. The warning was clear, and the weight of its implications weighed heavily on his shoulders. As he stood in the temple, the scepter pulsed softly, as though acknowledging the truth of the vision. "We can't ignore this," Theron said, his voice low, filled with urgency. "An army is on the horizon, a dark force that seeks the scepter, and perhaps more. We need to gather the villagers, prepare them for what's coming." Zara, who had been listening intently, nodded with grim determination. "We will not let them take what's ours, but we will need more than just warriors. We need to prepare our minds, our hearts, as much as our bodies. The battle ahead is not just physical." The elder Khepri, who had been watching the exchange with quiet understanding, finally spoke. "The scepter is more than a weapon. It is a key to ancient power that transcends even the mortal realm. Whoever leads this army is not merely seeking to conquer Weset-Minos. They seek dominion over the very forces of nature itself. We must be prepared not just to fight, but to outwit them." Theron nodded, absorbing Khepri's words. "What do we need to do?" Khepri stepped forward, his eyes dark with the weight of ancient knowledge. "The first thing we need is time. Time to prepare, time to learn. There are ancient rituals that can protect this village, but they are not without their risks. If we are to use the scepter to its full potential, we must understand its origins and its true purpose." "Where do we start?" Theron asked, resolute in his decision to protect the village at all costs. Khepri looked toward the ancient texts in the temple, the ones that had been passed down through generations. The temple of Amun-Ra, deep within the labyrinth, holds the answers we need. It is there that the scepter was forged, but the journey to the temple is fraught with peril. We will need a guide, a trusted soul to help us navigate the deeper labyrinths. Zara, always ready for a fight, spoke quickly. "I'll go. I've faced danger before, and I know the labyrinth. I'll guide you." "No," Khepri said firmly. "This task is too great for a warrior alone. We need someone who understands the balance between the physical and the mystical. Theron, it is you who must go. Only you can harness the full power of the scepter." Theron looked at the elder, a sense of dread creeping over him. He had already been through so much, and the idea of venturing back into the heart of the labyrinth was enough to fill him with unease. But he knew that Khepri was right. The scepter had chosen him, and only he could unlock its secrets. "I'll go," Theron said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "But we'll need more than just knowledge. We'll need an army, and we'll need allies. I'll return as quickly as I can." That evening, the village gathered at the central square where the great bonfire blazed. The villagers, their faces etched with the lines of worry and determination, listened as Theron spoke. Zara stood beside him, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, a symbol of the strength they would need to protect what was theirs. "The time has come," Theron began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "An army is on its way to Weset-Minos. We've seen their leader, and we know that they will stop at nothing to take the Scepter of Amun-Ra. But we will not yield. We will fight for our home, for our people, for our future." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The villagers had always known that one day they would face such a challenge, but to have it now, to have it so soon, was a bitter pill to swallow. Still, they stood firm. "But there is more," Theron continued. "I must journey into the labyrinth once more, to seek the answers we need, to learn the full extent of the scepter's power. We cannot defeat this enemy with strength alone. We must understand the forces at play." Zara stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with the same determination. "I will lead the defense of the village in Theron's absence. I will train our warriors and ensure that we are ready when the time comes." Theron turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with gratitude. "Thank you, Zara. Your strength and leadership will be crucial." With a final glance at the crowd, Theron turned and walked toward the temple. The night air was cool, but a sense of heat and tension lingered in his chest. The task ahead was immense, and the road through the labyrinth was not one he could take lightly. But it was a road he had no choice but to walk. The next morning, Theron set off, his heart heavy with the weight of his journey. Zara, Capri, and a few others saw him off, their faces a mixture of hope and concern. The labyrinth lay ahead, and it was a place that had haunted Theron's dreams since the moment he had first set foot inside. As he ventured deeper into the winding paths of the labyrinth, the air grew thick with the scent of ancient stone and forgotten memories. The walls, once familiar, now felt alien and oppressive. The further he went, the more he felt the presence of something watching him, something ancient and powerful, lingering just beyond the edge of his perception. Theron reached the heart of the labyrinth by dusk, where the temple of Amun-Ra stood, its towering columns half buried beneath the weight of centuries. The entrance was dark, and the air seemed to hum with an unseen energy. Taking a deep breath, Theron entered. Inside, the temple was silent, the only sound the echo of his footsteps against the cold stone floor. The scepter's power seemed to resonate from within the temple's depths, calling to him. He moved forward, guided by instinct and the flickering images from the visions he had seen. The chamber at the end of the hall was bathed in soft golden light, the source of which Theron could not identify. At the center of the chamber stood an altar, and atop it rested the true heart of the labyrinth's secrets, a second scepter. This one was different. Its power was palpable, and it pulsed with energy. As Theron approached, the air around him grew thick, as though the very walls of the temple were alive, watching him. Theron's breath quickened as he stepped closer to the altar, his eyes fixed on the second scepter. Unlike the one that had called to him in the village, this one seemed to hum with a darker, more foreboding power. It was as if the very essence of the labyrinth had been infused into the metal, forging a connection between the temple and the weapon. He hesitated for a moment, his fingers almost trembling as they hovered over the scepter. The vision that had guided him here replayed in his mind, its warning clear. Only one may wield the power of the Scepter of Amun-Ra. Theron's heart pounded in his chest as he carefully lifted the scepter from the altar. As his fingers wrapped around it, a surge of energy coursed through him. His mind was flooded with images of ancient times, of gods and men battling for control over the forces of nature. He saw the rise and fall of empires, the decay of knowledge, and the endless cycle of destruction and rebirth. The vision was overwhelming, but amidst the chaos, one figure stood out, a shadowy form, tall and imposing, with eyes that burned like embers. It was the leader of the army he had seen before, the one who sought to claim the scepter. The vision flickered and then vanished, leaving Theron breathless. He staggered backward, his hand still clutching the scepter. He knew now that the army was not just after the scepter, it was after the very power of the labyrinth, and they would stop at nothing to take it. But there was more. The scepter had shown him something else, a way to defeat this enemy, a way to harness the power of the labyrinth, to turn its magic against those who sought to use it for their own purposes. It was a risky plan, one that would require all of his strength and resolve. He could feel the presence of the labyrinth growing stronger, its ancient energy pulsing beneath his feet. The stone walls seemed to breathe with him, guiding his movements as he made his way to the heart of the temple. Back in the village, Zara stood at the forefront of the gathering army. The warriors had been trained, their spirits sharpened, but doubt lingered in the air. They had heard of Theron's journey, and many wondered if he would return in time to lead them in the coming battle. Zara's mind was consumed with strategy. The village had its defenses, but she knew that without Theron and the knowledge he sought, they would be hard-pressed to stand against invading forces. She trusted him, but she also knew that the labyrinth was a dangerous place. What if he didn't return? Khepri, who had stayed behind to assist in the preparation, approached her. His face was etched with concern, though he tried to mask it with calm words. "He will return," Khepri said, his voice steady. "But we must be ready for what comes." Zara nodded. "We are ready. I'll lead them with or without him." "But you won't be without him," Khepri replied, a glimmer of certainty in his eyes. "The scepter's power runs deeper than we understand. It has chosen him for a reason." Zara turned her gaze toward the distant horizon. The air was thick with tension, the faint sounds of approaching drums reaching her ears. The enemy was drawing near. "We won't let them take it," Zara said, her voice low but filled with conviction. "We fight for this village. We fight for our future." As Theron stood in the heart of the temple, his mind racing with the knowledge that had been imparted to him, he felt the weight of the decision he had to make. The scepter's power was vast, but it came with a price. To unleash its true potential, he would have to sacrifice something, perhaps even himself. The air around him grew heavier, the temple walls seeming to close in as he contemplated the path ahead. He knew that he couldn't do this alone. He needed Zara, Capri, and the villagers to stand with him. But there was no time to waste. Theron turned and made his way back through the labyrinth. The stone walls shifted and groaned as he walked, as if the labyrinth itself were reacting to his presence. He could feel the tension building, the threat drawing closer with each passing moment. Zara stood on the front lines, her sword in hand as the first wave of the enemy approached. The sky was dark and the air was filled with the scent of smoke and dust. The villagers had gathered behind her, their faces determined, but there was a palpable fear in the air. They had prepared as best as they could, but they knew the battle ahead would be unlike anything they had ever faced. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the far side of the village. Zara's heart skipped a beat as she turned to see a figure emerging from the mist. It was Theron. He was back. With the Scepter of Amun-Ra in his hand, his presence was like a beacon of hope. The villagers cheered as he walked toward them, his eyes fierce and focused. Zara rushed to his side, her hand instinctively reaching for his arm. "You're here," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and determination. "I'm here," Theron replied, his voice steady. "And we're ready." He turned to the villagers, raising the scepter high. The ancient weapon seemed to glow with an otherworldly energy, and for a moment it was as though the very air around them hummed with power. The enemy army was almost upon them. Theron knew that the battle was about to begin, but with the scepter in his grasp, he felt a surge of confidence. They had the power of the labyrinth on their side, and they would not yield. The battle was fierce. The enemy fought with brutal efficiency, but the villagers stood their ground. Zara led the charge, her sword flashing as she cut down the invaders, while Capri worked behind the scenes, weaving protective spells to shield their people. Theron stood at the heart of the battle, the scepter glowing brightly as he channeled its energy. With each swing of the weapon, waves of power rippled out, knocking back the enemy with force. But the leader of the enemy army was not easily deterred. As the battle raged on, the figure Theron had seen in his vision emerged from the fray, a tall, imposing figure clad in dark armor, his eyes glowing with the same fiery intensity that Theron had glimpsed in his vision. The two locked eyes across the battlefield, and for a moment it was as though time stood still. The leader of the army raised his sword, and the clash between them was inevitable. Theron felt the weight of the scepter in his hand, its power coursing through him. He could feel the ancient energy of the labyrinth guiding his movements, as he charged toward the enemy leader. The battle between them was brutal, each blow of their weapons shaking the ground beneath their feet. The power of the scepter was immense, but the enemy leader fought with a desperation that matched Theron's own. The battle seemed to stretch on forever, but in the end it was the power of the scepter that tipped the scales. With a final mighty swing, Theron struck down the enemy leader, his sword falling to the ground with a heavy thud. The remaining invaders hesitated, unsure of what to do. The fear that had gripped them seemed to dissipate as their leader fell, and the villagers seized the opportunity to strike. The remaining invaders hesitated, unsure of what to do. The fear that had gripped them seemed to dissipate as their leader fell, and the villagers seized the opportunity to strike. Victory was theirs. As the dust settled and the last of the enemy forces were driven off, Theron stood with the scepter in his hand, his body battered but unbroken. He turned to Zara, who was covered in blood but alive and victorious. "We did it," Theron said, his voice hoarse. Zara nodded, a weary smile crossing her face. "We did." The village had been saved, and the power of the labyrinth had proven to be the key to their victory. But Theron knew that the journey was far from over. The Scepter of Amun-Ra had shown him only a glimpse of its true power, and the road ahead was uncertain. But for now, they had won, and that was enough. The sun began to rise over the village, casting a soft golden light across the scene of the battle. The victorious villagers moved through the battlefield, gathering the fallen and tending to the wounded. There was an air of exhaustion mixed with a deep sense of relief. The enemy had been defeated, and the village had been spared, at least for now. Theron stood near the edge of the village, staring into the distance. His hand still gripped the Scepter of Amun-Ra, its dark glow now dimmed. The power that had surged through him during the battle was slowly ebbing, leaving him feeling both drained and invincible. Zara approached him, her expression solemn but resolute. "You did it, Theron. We couldn't have won without you." Theron nodded but said nothing at first. He was still processing everything that had happened. The weight of the scepter in his hand felt both like a burden and a blessing. He had unlocked its power to save the village, but he also knew that this victory was only temporary. The world beyond the labyrinth still held dangers, and there was much more to learn. "I didn't do it alone," Theron finally said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet gratitude. "We all fought together. The scepter may have been powerful, but it was our unity that led us to victory." Zara smiled, though it was tinged with weariness. "True, but you're the one who unlocked its power. I think that makes you more than just a soldier in this fight." Theron turned to face her. "What do you mean?" Zara took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she glanced over the battlefield. "I mean, there's more to the scepter than we understand, more than just what we've seen. It's not just a weapon, it's a symbol, and it's chosen you, Theron, I can feel it in the air, in the way the labyrinth reacted when you wielded it. Theron felt a stirring within him, a sense of destiny he couldn't deny. He had felt the weight of that power, had felt the connection to something far older than himself, something that went beyond the village, beyond the scepter itself. He turned back to the village, where the survivors were already beginning to rebuild, tending to the injured and mourning their losses. The fight was over, but the real work was only beginning. The scepter had saved them, but it had also brought with it new questions, questions that Theron would need to answer. I don't know what the scepter's true purpose is, Theron admitted, but I have a feeling we haven't seen the last of the labyrinth. Zara nodded. I think you're right. The labyrinth is ancient, full of secrets we can't even begin to understand, but I trust that you'll find the answers. Theron looked down at the scepter once more. It glowed faintly, its power still pulsing with an unknown energy. As he gripped it tighter, a sense of purpose filled him. He knew now that his journey was far from over. Days passed, and the village began to recover. The warriors who had fought alongside Theron were honored, and a great feast was held in celebration of their victory. But amidst the celebration, Theron remained restless. The scepter weighed heavily on his mind, and the knowledge that more dangers lurked beyond the village left him uneasy. One evening, as he sat alone outside the village, staring into the setting sun, Khepri approached him. The scholar's face was thoughtful, his usual calm demeanor tinged with something more urgent. You've been quiet, Khepri remarked, taking a seat beside Theron. I can see it in your eyes. You're not at peace. Theron sighed. I keep thinking about the labyrinth, about what it really is. I know the scepter is a key to something greater, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more to it. Something we haven't seen yet. Khepri studied him for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful. The labyrinth has always been a place of mystery, but I believe you're right. It holds more than just secrets. It holds power, ancient power. Theron turned to him, his brow furrowing. Do you know more? What does the labyrinth really want? Khepri hesitated, his eyes scanning the horizon. I believe the labyrinth isn't just a place. It's a living entity, something ancient, something that predates even the gods themselves. The scepter may have been created to control that power, but in doing so, it may have also bound the labyrinth's will to the wielder. It chooses those it deems worthy, those who can harness its power. And you, Theron, are the one it has chosen. Theron's heart raced. Chosen for what? Khepri looked at him gravely. That I do not know, but I suspect that the labyrinth will call to you again. There are many trials ahead, trials that will test your strength, your mind, and your very soul. If you seek to understand the labyrinth, you must be prepared for what lies beneath. That night, Theron could not sleep. His mind swirled with Khepri's words, and the power of the scepter pulsed restlessly in his hands. He could feel it calling to him, a silent pull that beckoned him toward the heart of the labyrinth once more. As he lay awake, contemplating his next move, a strange whisper echoed through his mind. It was faint, like a distant voice on the wind, but he could hear it clearly. "The time has come, Theron. You must come to me. The scepter is but the first key. Unlock the rest, and you will understand your destiny." Theron's eyes snapped open. The voice was not in his head. It was coming from the labyrinth itself, and it was waiting for him. The following morning, Theron gathered his belongings and made his way to the labyrinth's entrance. Zara, Khepri, and the villagers watched him silently, understanding that this journey was his alone. Zara approached him, her expression soft but resolute. "You don't have to do this, Theron. We can rebuild here. We can fight together without going into the labyrinth again." Theron smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I know. But I have to understand what it is, what the scepter is, and what it has to do with me." "I trust you," Zara said quietly, "but please, be careful." Theron nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of the journey ahead. He turned back toward the labyrinth, the path before him growing darker, more mysterious with each step. The secrets of the labyrinth awaited, and he would face them, no matter what the cost. The entrance to the labyrinth loomed before Theron, as imposing as ever. Its towering stone walls were etched with ancient symbols, and the air around it felt thick with magic. The Scepter of Amun-Ra pulsed lightly in his grip, as though attuned to the very heartbeat of the labyrinth itself. With a deep breath, Theron stepped forward, crossing the threshold once more. The moment his foot touched the ground inside, the world around him shifted. The labyrinthine walls twisted and distorted, reshaping themselves, as if welcoming him back or perhaps testing him. The path ahead was uncertain, and every corner could lead to either an answer or a greater mystery. He continued forward, the weight of the scepter a constant reminder of the responsibility he now bore. The whispers from the labyrinth had grown louder in his mind, urging him onward. "Come, Theron." The voice echoed again, deeper and more insistent. "The answers lie within. Only you can unlock the truth." Theron pushed forward, his mind focused. The scepter hummed with energy, guiding him along the winding paths of the labyrinth. As he ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the shadows cast by the ancient walls seemed to move with him as if they were alive. In the distance, he saw a faint light, barely perceptible at first, but growing brighter the closer he approached. He followed the glow, his footsteps steady, until the path opened up into a vast chamber. The walls of the chamber were covered in intricate carvings and symbols, many of which Theron recognized as ancient, but their meanings were still a mystery to him. At the center of the room stood an altar, bathed in a soft, ethereal light. Upon the altar lay a stone slab, and etched into the stone was a single word. Awaken. The air around it seemed to vibrate with an ancient power, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Theron approached cautiously, the scepter still in his hand. As he neared the altar, the whispers intensified, filling his ears with an urgent command. Place the scepter upon the stone. The voice commanded. Only then will the path forward be revealed. His heart pounding, Theron stepped forward and placed the scepter upon the stone slab. The moment it made contact, a surge of energy exploded through the room. The walls trembled and the ground beneath him shook. A blinding light enveloped him, and for a moment Theron was disoriented, unable to see or hear anything. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded, leaving Theron standing alone in the center of the chamber. The altar remained, but now it was different. The symbols on the walls began to glow softly, and the air hummed with a new intensity. In front of him, a door, one he had never noticed before, slowly began to open. Beyond it was a corridor lined with mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of Theron. Some were older, some younger, some stronger, some weaker. But in every reflection he saw the same thing, the scepter glowing with power. The path is clear. The voice spoke once more, its tone now calm and knowing. You must pass through the mirrors. Each one will reveal something about you, something you must face before you can continue. Only by confronting your true self will you unlock the next step. Theron took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor, the mirrors reflecting his every move. Each step felt like a challenge, as though the labyrinth itself was pushing him to look deeper into his soul. The first mirror showed him as a child, small and weak, with no understanding of the power he would one day wield. He saw his younger self standing in the village, watching the older warriors with awe. He remembered how he had felt, powerless, unimportant, and overlooked. The mirror seemed to mock him, reminding him of the boy he once was, the boy who never imagined that he would become a hero. You were once powerless, the voice whispered, but you have changed. Embrace that change. Theron's reflection shifted and he moved forward, determined to face whatever came next. The second mirror reflected him as a young man, struggling to understand his purpose. He saw himself standing at the edge of the labyrinth, unsure of whether to enter or turn back. His heart ached as he remembered that moment of doubt, the moment when he had almost given up. The scepter had seemed like a distant hope, a powerful artifact that could never truly belong to him. You questioned yourself, the voice said, its tone softer now. But doubt is natural. What matters is that you push through it. Theron stepped past the mirror, his resolve growing stronger. The third mirror showed him as he was now, a warrior who had faced battles, who had unlocked the power of the scepter and used it to protect his village. His reflection was strong and confident, but there was something in his eyes, something that spoke of the fear and uncertainty still hidden deep within him. "You are strong," the voice said, "but you're not without fear. Embrace your vulnerability and you will find true strength." Theron nodded, accepting this truth. He had always been afraid of failure, of not living up to the expectations placed upon him. But now he understood that fear did not make him weak, it made him human. As he continued through the corridor, the reflections grew more fragmented, more distorted. Each mirror showed a different aspect of him, his triumphs, his failures, his doubts, and his dreams. The journey through the mirrors felt like a lifetime, each reflection forcing him to confront another part of himself that he had kept hidden. Finally, he reached the end of the corridor. The last mirror was different. It was not a reflection of Theron at all, but a vision of the labyrinth itself, a labyrinthine maze stretching endlessly into the horizon. In the center of the maze stood a figure, tall and imposing, shrouded in shadows. Theron's heart raced as he realized that the figure was him, his future self, standing at the heart of the labyrinth, holding the scepter. "You will face this," the voice whispered. "It is your destiny to navigate the labyrinth of your own soul and emerge stronger." With a final breath, Theron stepped through the mirror and the corridor vanished behind him. Theron emerged from the mirror, stepping into an entirely new realm. The air felt different here, thicker, charged with an ancient energy that seemed to hum around him. The labyrinth had changed once again, shifting to match the depths of his journey. Gone were the simple corridors and chambers. Before him lay a vast, ever-shifting maze, with no clear path forward. The walls loomed high above him, their surfaces glistening with an iridescent sheen, shifting constantly as if the very stone was alive. He could feel the presence of the Minotaur within these walls, waiting, watching. The whispers that had guided him thus far were now silent. The labyrinth itself had taken over, and it was no longer just a maze of stone, but a living, breathing entity that seemed to respond to his every movement. Theron tightened his grip on the scepter. It pulsed in his hand, the energy within it resonating with the labyrinth's magic. He could feel the pull of something greater, something he had yet to understand. The walls of the maze seemed to close in on him, urging him to move, to seek out the heart of the labyrinth. Suddenly, the floor beneath him trembled, and a deep, resonant growl echoed through the labyrinth. Theron froze, his heart racing. The ground trembled again, and a figure emerged from the shadows. A colossal Minotaur, its eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light, stepped into the open. The beast's massive frame was covered in dark fur, its horns curling upwards in a menacing arc. It was an imposing figure, even more so in the depths of the labyrinth, where the very stone seemed to bend to its will. Theron's hand instinctively moved toward the scepter, but before he could react, the Minotaur's voice boomed through the chamber. "You have come far, Theron," it said, its voice deep and rumbling, like thunder shaking the earth itself. But you are not yet ready to face me. You have come to claim the scepter, but first you must understand its true power. You must prove yourself worthy. Theron swallowed hard, his body tense with anticipation. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the moment when everything would be revealed. What must I do? Theron asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. The Minotaur stepped closer, its massive form casting a shadow that seemed to stretch for miles. You must confront the heart of the labyrinth. The creature growled. Only by facing the true darkness within yourself can you wield the power of the scepter. Only then will you unlock the secrets of the labyrinth. Theron nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the challenge before him. The scepter pulsed again, almost as if it were urging him to move forward. He stepped past the Minotaur, determination in his eyes. "I am ready," he said, his voice unwavering. The Minotaur snorted, a sound that could have been a laugh or a growl. "Then face the darkness within," it said, stepping aside to reveal a passage hidden in the shadows. The walls of the labyrinth seemed to part for him, and the path ahead grew clearer. Theron took a deep breath and moved forward, the scepter guiding him through the twisting maze. The air grew colder as he descended deeper into the heart of the labyrinth. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. This was the final trial. As he walked, the walls seemed to close in around him, and the darkness became oppressive. The echoes of his footsteps were swallowed by the silence, and the only sound was a steady thrum of the scepter, now vibrating with a palpable energy. Finally, he reached the center of the labyrinth, a vast chamber, its walls covered in ancient symbols and glyphs. At the center of the room was a pedestal, upon which rested a glowing crystal, its light pulsing softly. Theron approached the pedestal, his heart racing. He could feel the power emanating from the crystal, a power that seemed to call to him. As he reached out to touch it, the room seemed to shift around him. The light from the crystal grew blinding, and a figure materialized before him, a shadowy version of himself, twisted and distorted. The figure stared at him with cold, empty eyes, and its voice echoed in the chamber. "You have come far," the figure said, its voice a mirror of Theron's own. "But you are not yet whole. You are not yet complete. You cannot wield the power of the scepter until you accept the darkness within you." Theron recoiled, the figure's presence sending a wave of dread through him. But he stood his ground, refusing to turn away. "I accept it," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "I accept the darkness, and I will use it to forge my destiny." The shadowy figure smirked, its form shifting as it grew larger and more menacing. "Then you must face me," it said, its voice becoming a growl. "Face the darkness within and prove that you are worthy of the power you seek." Theron raised the scepter high, its light cutting through the shadows. The figure lunged toward him, but he was ready. With a shout, he unleashed the full force of the scepter's power, sending a wave of light crashing into the shadow. The figure screamed, its form disintegrating into nothingness, leaving only silence behind. The crystal on the pedestal flared once more, and the room returned to its original state. The power that had filled the air now hummed with a calm intensity. Theron lowered the scepter, feeling a sense of completion that he had never experienced before. The labyrinth had tested him, but now it had yielded its secrets. The Scepter of Amun-Ra was his to wield, and with it he had unlocked his true potential. The labyrinth, once a prison of endless corridors and unsolvable puzzles, had now become something entirely different. Theron stood at its heart, the Scepter of Amun-Ra in his hand, feeling its power course through him. The stone walls, once oppressive and cold, seemed to bow in reverence to him now, their ancient inscriptions glowing softly in the dim light. He took a moment to breathe in the stillness, feeling the weight of what he had just accomplished. The battle within the heart of the labyrinth had been fierce, but the darkness he had faced within himself was now gone. The shadowy figure, a twisted reflection of his deepest fears and regrets, had been vanquished, and in its place he felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. As the echoes of the confrontation faded into the distance, Theron knew that his journey was not yet over. The labyrinth had given him a gift, the scepter's power, but it was now up to him to decide how to wield it. He had learned that true strength came not from the artifacts he held, but from the choices he made. He turned to the path that had opened before him, a final passage that led out of the heart of the labyrinth. The Minotaur's presence still loomed, though its threat had waned. The creature had seen something in him, something worth acknowledging, and now it seemed to have retreated, allowing Theron to move forward unchallenged. As he made his way down the final stretch, the walls of the labyrinth began to shift once again, opening up to reveal the outside world. The sunlight broke through the cracks in the stone, streaming into the chamber with an intensity that made Theron squint. He shielded his eyes as he stepped into the light, the world beyond the labyrinth waiting for him. The familiar sight of the village within the forest greeted him. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling softly. The air was fresh, and the world seemed alive with possibilities. It was a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness he had just emerged from. But Theron knew that things could never go back to how they were. He had unlocked the power of the scepter and learned the secrets of the labyrinth. The world around him had changed, and so had he. He walked towards the village, the scepter glowing faintly in his hand. As he passed through the gates, he could feel the weight of the people's gaze upon him. They had heard the rumors of the labyrinth's trials, the whispers of a hero who might emerge victorious. They did not know the full truth, but they sensed that something had changed in him. Theron was no longer just a seeker of knowledge. He was a man reborn, with a purpose greater than he had ever imagined. Inside the village square, Zara and Khepri were waiting for him, their eyes wide with anticipation. Zara stepped forward first, her expression a mixture of relief and admiration. "You did it," she said, her voice full of awe. "The labyrinth, it's over." Theron nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's not over," he said quietly, "but it's a beginning." Khepri stepped forward as well, his usual stoic demeanor replaced with something softer, almost reverent. "The scepter is yours, Theron, and with it you can reshape the world." Theron looked down at the scepter in his hand, its power resonating with the energy of the labyrinth. He felt its weight, not just in his hand, but deep within his soul. The power was immense, but it was also fragile. It could bring salvation, or it could bring destruction, and it was up to him to decide which path to follow. "I'm not sure I can do this alone," Theron admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've learned so much, but there's still so much I don't understand. I don't know what comes next." Zara placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You won't be alone. We're with you. We've seen what you're capable of. Together we'll make sure the power of the scepter is used for good." Khepri nodded in agreement. "You've proven yourself, Theron. Now it's time to bring that strength to the world." Theron looked out across the village, the horizon stretching before him. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The labyrinth had shaped him, and the power of the scepter was now in his hands. He had faced his darkest fears and emerged victorious, but the true challenge was yet to come. As the sun set behind the village, casting a warm golden glow over the land, Theron knew that his journey was far from over. The labyrinth had shown him the path, but it was up to him to walk it. With the scepter in his grasp and his companions by his side, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The dawn of new challenges. The journey that had begun in the heart of the labyrinth was not one that could simply be forgotten. The Scepter of Amun-Ra, now firmly in Theron's grasp, was not just a symbol of power, but a key to unlocking mysteries far beyond the confines of the village. As the days passed, he felt the weight of his destiny settling upon him. What lay ahead was as unknown as the dark labyrinth he had conquered, but one thing was certain: this was only the beginning. Theron, Zara, and Khepri made their way through the village, where people gathered to hear of the triumphant return of the one who had braved the labyrinth. The air was thick with anticipation, but there was also a hint of unease. They had heard the legends of the scepter and its immense power, but no one truly understood what it could mean for their world. Theron was not certain either. He paused, standing on the steps of the central temple. The village stretched out before him, its humble buildings bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. The elders who had once whispered about the labyrinth in fearful tones now looked to him with a mixture of reverence and hope. Theron, one of the elders called, stepping forward. You have returned with the Scepter of Amun-Ra. We know the tales. We know the power it holds. Theron nodded, but his expression was far from assured. The power of the scepter is immense, but it is also dangerous. I've seen what it can do. I've felt its pull, and I'm not certain I understand it fully. The elder's face softened. You have done what no one thought possible. You've brought the scepter back from the labyrinth. That is more than any of us could have imagined. But it was clear that the elder's words were more a form of comfort than true understanding. They had never known someone who had faced the labyrinth's trials, much less someone who had emerged victorious. "What will you do with the scepter?" Khepri asked, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. "What comes next?" Theron took a deep breath. He had wondered this himself ever since he had stepped out of the labyrinth's shadows. The scepter was an artifact of unimaginable power, but power alone was not enough to shape the world. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I will figure it out. There are things I need to understand, things that go beyond this village." Zara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Where do we begin?" Theron turned to face his companions, his resolve beginning to form. "We need to learn more about the world outside this village. The scepter's power isn't meant to be hidden away, but it's also not meant to be wielded recklessly." Khepri nodded thoughtfully. "There are places, ancient libraries, forgotten temples, that may hold the answers you seek, but they are dangerous. The world beyond is not as kind as it appears, and we are not the only ones who seek the scepter." The mention of others who might seek the scepter sent a chill down Theron's spine. He had seen how easily the labyrinth had swallowed those who ventured too close, and now it seemed that the scepter's secrets had the potential to draw the attention of darker forces. "We cannot afford to be careless," Theron said, his voice firm. "We will gather the knowledge we need and prepare for what lies ahead." The next few days were filled with discussions, strategies, and plans. Zara, with her skills as a warrior, and Khepri, with his vast knowledge of ancient lore, worked with Theron to explore every lead. They traveled to distant corners of the village, seeking information from those who had lived through the old days and the legends that had been passed down through generations. It was not long before they found their first clue, a map hidden deep within the temple library, its edges worn and tattered with age. The map depicted several locations that seemed to resonate with the ancient's power Theron had felt during his time in the labyrinth. These were places of old magic, places where the scepter might find its true purpose or fall into the wrong hands. One of the locations marked on the map stood out, a vast forgotten city that lay deep within the desert, where the sun burned so fiercely that even the gods themselves seemed to shy away. Legend spoke of a great temple there, built in honor of the gods, a temple that had long since been abandoned. But the map suggested something else, that the temple still held something of great power, something that could either aid or destroy them. "We have to go there," Theron said, his voice filled with determination. "This is the next step. If we can uncover what's hidden in that city, we may finally understand the scepter's true purpose." Zara's eyes narrowed as she looked at the map. "The desert is treacherous. Many have tried to find that city, and none have returned." Khepri nodded. "The journey will not be easy, but if there's any chance that the answers we seek lie within that city, we must take it." The decision was made. Over the next few weeks, they gathered supplies, prepared for the harsh desert journey, and made final arrangements. The village buzzed with anticipation, but there was an undercurrent of concern. Theron's return with the scepter had changed things, but what would happen when he left again? The villagers feared that the same forces that had once threatened the labyrinth might now turn their attention to their home. But Theron was resolute. The scepter was not just a burden, it was a key, one that would unlock the future of the world, and no matter what dangers awaited them, he was determined to face them. As they stood at the edge of the village, ready to embark on their journey, Theron looked out across the horizon. The desert awaited, and beyond it, the secrets of the ancient world. It was a path filled with uncertainty, but one he knew he had to follow. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and with the power of the scepter, they would shape the world according to their will. The desert welcomed them not with silence, but with the mournful cry of the wind sweeping across the endless dunes. For days, Theron, Zara, and Khepri traveled, the burning sun relentless by day and the frigid winds cutting by night. Yet the map remained their guide, a sacred relic etched with ancient ink, pulsing faintly with a glow. Each time Theron touched the Scepter of Amun-Ra to its surface. "We're close," Khepri said on the fourth morning, peering at the shifting sands. "The temple should be buried somewhere beneath this region. The map points to the convergence of 3 dune ridges." Zara shielded her eyes, scanning the horizon. "I see nothing but sand. Are we certain this isn't a ghost city?" Theron planted the scepter into the ground. The sand trembled. A faint hum echoed through the air, low, ancient, and powerful. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it particles of fine dust that revealed the worn tops of massive stone columns. "It's here," Theron said. "Buried, but not gone." They began digging around the base of one column. As they cleared more sand, the entrance to a great stone staircase emerged. Strange glyphs covered its surface, symbols that Khepri traced with reverent fingers. "These are pre-dynastic," he whispered. "This place predates even the myths of Osiris. It's older than language." They descended into the darkness, torches lit, the air cool and dry. The deeper they went, the more the walls came alive with carvings, depictions of winged beings, divine beasts, and a circular symbol surrounding a horned figure standing between two worlds. "That's the Minotaur," Theron muttered, pointing. "But not as a monster, as a guardian. He wasn't just a creature of legend," Zara said slowly. "He was a protector of balance." At the base of the stairs, they entered a massive underground chamber. The ceiling was held up by pillars sculpted into towering gods. In the center sat an altar, and on it a large obsidian mirror framed with gold and scarlet stone. The scepter in Theron's hand vibrated violently. "This is it," he said. "This is what the scepter led us to." Khepri approached cautiously. "It's not just a mirror, it's a portal, one of the gateways between the realms of gods and mortals. The labyrinth, it was only the first gate." The mirror shimmered. Images began to flicker across its surface. Visions of the past, the future, and of distant lands. They saw war, peace, rise and ruin, and they saw eyes, thousands of them, watching. A voice echoed through the chamber, deep and commanding. "Bearer of the scepter, you have awakened the path of the balance. Know this, power is not possession, it is purpose. Wield it blindly and you will summon destruction. Walk the path and you may become more than mortal." Theron stood firm. "I don't seek domination. I seek understanding. I want to protect what remains." The voice was silent. Then the mirror opened like a ripple in water, revealing a swirling void beyond. Zara gripped her blade tighter. "Are we stepping into another labyrinth?" "No," Theron said quietly. "We're stepping into truth." They passed through. On the other side was a world bathed in twilight. Stars hung low. Ruins floated in the air. Massive statues drifted like clouds. It was a realm of memory, dream, and prophecy. This was the realm between, what the ancients called Aru-Tep, the veiled garden. Here they would face visions of what could be, of choices yet to come. Here the final test awaited. The silence in the final chamber was unlike any other, dense, sacred, and unnerving. The walls were not carved of stone, but made of shimmering light, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. No doorway marked their entrance, and no exit was in sight. In the center of the room hovered a crystal sphere, spinning slowly. Within it, fragments of time danced. Memories, battles, faces, whispers of ancient power. The Scepter of Amun-Ra floated above it, blazing with a celestial glow. Khepri stepped forward, breath held. Khepri said, "This chamber, it's beyond mortal creation. It's divine." Zara drew her blade instinctively, scanning the strange space. Zara said, "Then where's the final guardian? Every gate we passed had one." Theron approached the sphere, and as he did, the room shifted. The walls expanded infinitely. Light folded inward, and from the sphere a figure emerged, tall, graceful, draped in golden robes. Its face held no features, only light. It spoke without words, and yet they heard. You seek the truth of the labyrinth. You seek the power of the gods. But truth is not given. It must be chosen. The figure pointed to each of them in turn. Khepri, who carries the wisdom of the past. Zara, who wields strength and honor. And Theron, the seeker, whose heart is torn between destiny and doubt. The light being lifted its hands. The sphere split open, revealing 3 paths of memory. To claim the scepter, you must relive the truth. Not the tales of men, not the myths of kings, but the untold story. Without waiting, Theron stepped into the central path. The others followed. Suddenly, they were no longer in the chamber, but standing at the edge of a vast battlefield, thousands of years in the past. The War of Weset-Minos unfolded before them, not as legend had told it, but as it truly happened. The Minotaur, Asterius, was not a monster. He was a protector, a sacred guardian of the balance between the Egyptian and Greco-Roman worlds, a child of prophecy, born with divine blood, cursed not by nature but by fear and betrayal. They watched as kings hunted him, as high priests bound him, and as temples were raised to twist the narrative. They saw the labyrinth not as a prison, but as a sanctuary Asterius built with his own hands, to contain the chaos his power could unleash. Theron's heart ached. Theron said he wasn't the beast, he was the sacrifice. Zara's grip on her blade loosened. Zara said, "They made him the villain, and we believed them." Khepri turned to the light being. Khepri said, "Then who holds the guilt of this deception?" The scene changed, showing a council of ancient gods, Ra, Poseidon, Hades, Thoth. Their eyes were filled with conflict. They had chosen silence to preserve order. They had let Asterius suffer to keep the realms apart. To protect mankind, they let the truth die. Until now, back in the chamber, the sphere had cracked. The scepter hovered before them, no longer glowing, but waiting. Only one may wield it, but only one who understands that power is not to rule, but to redeem. Theron stepped forward. Theron said, "I am not a god, but I am willing to bear the truth." He touched the scepter. A blinding flash. Visions flooded him, of cities rebuilding, of monsters freed from myths, of the labyrinth no longer hidden but honored. And within it, the spirit of Asterius smiled. "You have told my story. Let it never be forgotten again." Theron, Zara, and Khepri emerged from the realm between. In Theron's hand, the scepter shimmered, gentle, not blazing. The labyrinth behind him reshaped itself, no longer a maze of confusion, but a monument of remembrance. They returned to Weset-Minos, not as heroes of conquest, but as bearers of truth. Khepri returned to his people, chronicling the real tale. Zara stood before warriors and rewrote their code of honor. And Theron wandered, a seeker still, ensuring the story lived on, not as myth, but as the untold story of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth.